Hi guys! So today I'm really excited because I'm going to be interviewing Craig Holliday. He is a gifted meditation and spiritual teacher as well as a licensed counselor. He is the author of the book Fully Human, Fully Divine, and he has a YouTube channel where he integrates his Eastern philosophies with the Western psychology. Craig's personal journey has been deeply influenced by intense study with awakened masters. So without further ado, let's jump in.
Hi, Craig. Oh my God, it's so
Hi.
nice to see you.
Yeah, it's good to meet you.
Welcome.
So, is it Laura?
Yes, it's Laura. I go on YouTube as Soulful Taz. I basically had a Kundalini awakening 2 years ago. It was insane. I was basically bedbound and didn't know what was going on. And I actually remember finding one of your videos and being like, oh my God. I already knew what was happening, but you just cemented it, and it was wonderful, honestly, to really to see your energy and the way you expressed it. And so
Yeah.
a year and a half later, here I am, and I'm really excited to dive in. It was pretty intense, pretty painful. So I was wondering what your awakening was like, because I heard it was pretty painful as well, and if you could just describe that a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, my awakening, it went on for a number of years. It's hard to say where to start, but so I had a teacher who I was studying with and apprenticing with, and a lot of people, they tell me they have a teacher, and that means they read a book somewhere or they went on a retreat once. But with my teacher, I worked for him, like I was his apprentice, and so it's like that old school guru and student relationship. And so I was with him, 40 or 50 hours a week building a retreat center. And so I was always around this intensity of energy, this intensity of grace from just being with my teacher. He's a very powerfully awakened individual. And I used to have just tremendous back pain. And this back pain went on for a good part of 8 years. And,
Wow.
It was so painful that, I'd go to bed in tears. I would cry throughout the day. There just felt like there was just like this intensity in my back, like it was going to explode. And, I'm not the kind of guy that goes to doctors or takes medication or, drinks alcohol or, smokes pot or anything. So there wasn't any sense of like getting relief from it. But there were times, during that 8 years, where I would just be, say, maybe I was sitting and meditating with my teacher, and I would, be having these tears because I was in so much pain, and then just in an instant, the pain would turn to bliss or euphoria, and I'd be like, oh, like, what's this,
It's not the usual, yeah.
Yeah, and then it would go back to the pain, and so, but for that 8 years, it was like 99.9% of the time, it was pain. But at some point, that pain, it started to really unravel, and those glimpses of bliss started to happen more and more often. And at one point, I went on, the main teacher I studied with, his name is David, and then I was also studying with Adyashanti.
Oh, wow.
Too. And so, I'd just go and visit with Adya because he lives in California, go on retreat with him. But I did this like back-to-back retreat, one with my teacher David and then one with Adya. And then I came home and I was in intense pain. And, I'd seen, all kinds of healers and body workers and chiropractors. And some were helpful, some weren't. But like I used to go see this old chiropractor. And he'd crack my neck, and I would literally just bounce and convulse on the table. And,
Wow.
he was like 86 years old, and he'd say, what would he say to me? He would say something funny, like, the Lord made you out of a different kind of mold, Craig, like a different kind of cast.
Yeah.
It always made me smile, but, my body would shake and tremble and have these fits, and, one of the time that when it really began to open it was after those 2 retreats, and I met with my friend Chris. He was like a Thai body worker, and he was just doing some just gentle stretches on me, and my body started to go into convulsions and seizures in a very dramatic way, and he turned pale. he was kind of like, holy shit, like, should I call 911? And I can't tell you how many healers I've been to where they're like, should I call 911? And I said no, like, let me just sit here. And my body was, like, it was, I was going into those kriyas, but also convulsing, and but I kind of, convulsed on the floor for, I don't know, a half hour or so, and made myself to a chair in his waiting room. And he's like, are you going to be okay? And, I felt like, very much like, if you've ever seen like a new deer that was born, like a baby fawn or a baby horse, and they come out and they can barely walk. And that's what I felt like in my body, like, and I'd even like look at my body like, what the hell is this thing? Because there was so much light and energy and bliss and euphoria moving through me. And, it's funny because the people around me were just like absolutely terrified, thinking like, oh, this is horrid. What's going on with this person? But for me, internally, I mean, it was just, utterly amazing to have this intensity of pain open and release and just start to flow in a blissful and euphoric way. And so that was probably the big change, was going from this sense of like pressure and intensity and then opening into bliss and euphoria. Now, the whole thing took, people like to think of Kundalini awakening as something that just like happens once and it's like some great experience. No, I mean, this went on for a good part of 6 years of it opening, deepening, having to work with different chakra centers which were blocked, or, by blocked, I mean there was emotional pain there, or tightness or tension or unconscious resistance. And so, that took a good 6 years of working with that. And so along the way, the energy would intensify in different chakra centers, and I'd have to work with it. But, people are always like really interested in my symptoms. But some of the big things I had is, the ones that were real shocking were the seizures, the shaking. Lost my ability to walk at times, couldn't drive a car, couldn't speak. That was a fun one. Like sometimes I'd hold like a teacup, and then I would just drop it because I'd lose the ability to hold things.
Oh my God, I had that same one too.
Loss of memory, that was a real fun one. Still people's names, I like, sometimes I'll even look at my wife and be like, I can't remember her name. But what's happened is, because memory is an interesting thing. If you look at memory and consciousness, memory is always in our past, of course, because it's memory. But when you have been opened into the present moment, you live in the present moment. So everything seems fresh. It feels new. It feels alive. Like there was even a time my wife picked me up at the airport, and I went on a retreat, and I was coming home, and I couldn't remember what she looked like, and then I got off the plane, and, and I was walking out of the gate or whatever, and at some point this beautiful woman came and, jumped, and grabbed me and hugged me. I was like, oh, that's you, and there's just this sense of, falling in love with her.
Wow.
Again, and so
that's beautiful.
For some people it's terrifying. For someone like me, I'm like, I love it. I'm really happy with it. It's nice for so much of our memory to fall away, but for my wife it drives her crazy because, I'll say, oh babe, you look so beautiful. Where'd you get that dress? And she'll be like, you bought it for me last week. I say, oh, yeah, okay. Well, anyways, and she'll shake her head. And I mean, I have a daughter. It drives my daughter. I actually have 2 daughters, but it drives my older daughter crazy. She's just like, Dad, like, what the hell? And I get accused of being, for people who don't know me or don't know my consciousness. People ask me if I'm on drugs or this or that, but it's like, no. They'll say, are you high? And I'm like, well, what do you mean by high? Like, do I feel an expanded state of consciousness? Absolutely. Am I on drugs? No, I don't do drugs. Like that's not my path, is to live in that way. My path is to open into what's true here. And so, was it easy? No, it was confusing. It was painful. I mean, another dramatic thing that happened is I had, 6 to 9 months, maybe even a year of intense pressure in my head. I mean, it kind of felt like acid rain was happening in my head. I remember going and talking with Adi about that. He just laughed at me. He's like, oh, that's a really intense experience, right? And I'm like, what am I supposed to do? And he's just like, kind of smiled. And just
It's
this
all you
sense
can
of,
do.
yeah, this smile. But to me, because I've worked with thousands of people now, maybe even 10,000 people. I've worked with a lot of people who've had Kundalini-related disorders. But in the way I work, I just learned how to work with it myself, is if you have pain within your body, if you have pressure, the invitation is to open to it with the courage, like the courage of the heart, to really feel like, what is this that's happening within me? Now, most people, because they're egoically centered, if they have pain, they do this like little math equation. If there's pain, therefore, this is bad. Like that's the math that the ego does. If it feels good, it's bad. But if you step into true nature and you look at something, okay, it feels bad, you look deeper. You say, well, what is this? What is it truly? What's actually happening? Do I need to run from this pain? Do I need to medicate myself? Do I need to, become angry at God? Do I need to go into victim consciousness? Or can I be like Christ and open into that which is difficult? Can I walk into worlds of pain and suffering and see what's there? See what's there, like with the feeling in my head of like, it felt like an intensity of just hell in my head for, 6 to 9 months. And all I wanted to do was curl up in the fetal position, and cry or scream or just like bury my head under pillows. It felt like what I imagine intense migraines feel like. But as I sat with it quietly and continued to open with it, I noticed, oh, this is an intensity of light, a brilliant light. What if I keep opening? And so like even if I feel into my consciousness now in the head, there's like a shimmering brilliance there. But before you open to it, before you really get to know it, some people call it like tinnitus, like that screaming sound in your head. A lot of people get that with Kundalini, a screaming sound in like the ear. But to me it feels like just like a very brilliant high-pitched om. It's quite wonderful.
It's just opening up to it, correct? Just opening up to the sensations.
Opening to it. But I'm a guy, but like if you're a woman, it's not, just opening is like giving birth. It's, excuse my language here, but it's fucking really hard.
Yeah.
But in your heart that it's good. And so it's having that trust like a mother has before she's going to give birth. She's like, oh my God, I'm being ripped apart, like literally. Yep. But it's a movement of grace. It's a movement of something greater being born into this world. And so it takes someone who's courageous. Like the people I work with who struggle the most are individuals who've been traumatized, who don't know how strong they are. They're not in touch with their courage. They're not in touch with their strength. Different aspects of their psyche are like stuck in fear or trauma, or like a PTSD response. And I can say like I didn't have the most easy childhood. I didn't have a terrible childhood, but as a kid, I was like this little innocent kid who grew up in a house with like a military kind of father. And so I felt, like intense fear growing up and didn't know my strength. I felt like I always had to be small. And so the path of Kundalini, the beautiful thing about it is it invites you to realize the strength of your nature, the beauty of your nature, the innocence of your nature, the indestructibleness of your nature all through, and I'll say this, and I don't want people to take this the wrong way, but all through walking through hell.
That's the misinformation out there about Kundalini itself. There's a lot of negative things about it. There's a lot of it's a fast way to bliss. There's a lot of misinformation. Sure. And I believe when I heard you speak, it's the closest thing that I felt to the truth. So sure. If you could answer the question, what is Kundalini? What is that energy? And what you said it opened yourself up to your innocent nature, your courageous nature. What is its goal? What is the path of Kundalini itself?
Yeah, Kundalini is the force of evolution. That's the force of evolution. It's literally like the Big Bang. At one point, in life in the universe, there was nothing. And out of that nothingness exploded all of life. And so if you look at where Kundalini arises from, it arises from the root chakra. Well, what happens in the root chakra? It's the chakra of creation. This is where, divinity comes into form. And if you look at what kind of world we live in, God created an evolutionary world. It's a world of growth. And see, this is something that's been misunderstood in the world of spirituality, because most spirituality, arose, in ancient history when they didn't understand evolution. Spirituality in the past was taught in this way. You just wake up, it's like that, boom, you get exploded into cosmic consciousness, you rest there forever. Like the teachings of the Buddha, are all about no self and stepping into the absolute state of nirvana where nothing ever arises again. Well, that's not really our universe. Our universe, yes, is vast, spacious emptiness. That's like the Buddhist approach, there's just this formless space. It's vast, it's peaceful in every direction. That's beautiful. And there's also form. And if you look at form is growing. Form it's always continually growing and upgrading itself. And so if you feel into your true nature, if you go into your true nature, like right now, it's innocent, it's spacious, it's vast, it's free, it's eternal. That's like the timeless sense of self that we are. That's one. And that's where most spirituality focuses. But the second aspect of God is not just vast darkness in every direction. God is also stars, is life, is us, is you, is me, is plants, is animals, is all of creation. So it's this whole teaching on Shiva and Shakti. And Shiva being vast, spacious, innocence, or emptiness, however you want to experience that. And then Shakti is, Shiva giving birth to something incredible. And so Kundalini is that force of creation. It's that force of evolution. It's the force of the manifest. If you notice what's happening in the manifest world, it's eternally creating, eternally growing. And so because we're one with God, we're one with vast, spacious emptiness and this creative force. And so as this creative force awakens, just like one day the universe awoke and exploded in every direction, created stars and galaxies and whatever it is that we are, it's this force of intelligence that wakes up in us. And it comes, for a lot of people it comes intensely, it comes with a rush of energy. But people get focused on, it's just this rush of energy and it explodes you into cosmic consciousness. Well, there's a lot of layers and levels to it. But it's a movement of divine intelligence. But if you look at, say, God the Mother is this movement of intelligence. If you look at intelligence, if you look at evolution is not always pretty. And people make this mistake with God, and it's a very human and innocent mistake, but they do this again, if we're going to talk about math. It's a math equation that's kind of like, there's an all-loving God, so that means everything should be good and happy and easy in my life. And if there's not that, well, then there's not a God. Or I don't understand God's intelligence, and so therefore, there's no such thing as God. It's not really how life works, though. God is the intelligence of the universe, whether we know it and understand it or not. But sometimes intelligence in an evolutionary world will manifest as pain, as chaos, as confusion. Yet if you stay with it long enough, it unravels into something beautiful. And again, if any, we're going to bring up, say, motherhood. If you look at any mom, like when she gets pregnant, her body gets kind of crazy. She gets hormonal, all these shifts, these weird, uncomfortable feelings she has, going through the process of birth itself is, can be a nightmare for many women. But as she begins to let go and open into it, something beautiful comes forth. And Kundalini awakening is a very similar journey. It's confusing, it's messy, we get hot, we get cold, we have anxiety, we have panic, we have crazy thoughts and this and that. But as the energy continues to awaken in us and we're patient with it and treat it in a sense like we would treat a child, we trust, we open, we love, we begin to see, oh, this is something quite incredible. This is not, like I talk with a lot of people and they're like, Craig, how can I make this stop? And it's like, how do you make evolution stop? You don't. You can get on board with evolution or you can try to fight it. If you try to fight it, you're going to suffer really bad. If you get on board with it, I'm not going to bullshit you and say, oh, it's going to be super easy and you're going to get blasted into bliss and you'll rest there eternally and you'll wear an orange robe and have 10,000 followers. That's what so many people think. They get into this crazy magical thinking about what it is. It's God waking up in you as you. And how about that for a definition of Kundalini awakening? It's God waking up in you as you.
That is beautiful.
It's waking up in an evolutionary world where things aren't always easy. And so in a sense, what's being asked is we're letting go of, or we are evolving out of, say, a human or animal kind of consciousness that all of us have. And we're all evolving into a divine consciousness. That's life here on earth. Whether we've had Kundalini awakening or not, being a human being is a very bizarre thing because we're kind of animals and we do all these weird, freaky things with our body, and we have to eat and sleep and have sex and do all this bizarre acts, and we're very much kind of like dogs. And then we have this ability to also be like angels. And so what Kundalini does is inviting us to get in touch with this greater intelligence and to listen to the intelligence and allow it to move through you, to live through you, to open into you, open new worlds of grace and love and light within you, while simultaneously letting go of those old levels of consciousness, anger, fear, hurt, lust, whatever it is. And it's not that any of that's bad, but they're all just little stepping stones as we're opening into something greater in this world. And for most people, it's a messy, confusing, frightening process. But one of the big things that's radically helpful is if you have an absolute trust and absolute faith in God, in your true self, in the movement of life, then okay, like this is hard, but I'm growing into something better. And just like puberty, it's weird, it's confusing, it's hard, but it's like a doorway into being an adult. Not many people want to, go back and go through puberty again, but, once you've gotten through it with patience and just with this depth of understanding, there's a sense of like, oh yeah, I'm going to get through this. And so if you have that faith or trust or connection, with the depth of who and what you are, the process is much easier than if we don't have that. If we have the egoic thought, which almost everyone has, it's me against life, there's something wrong with me, I'm alone in the world, there is no God. If you go down that channel, which a lot of people do, you're still going to evolve. It's just going to be slower and more difficult. But it takes someone who's courageous enough to not just judge, okay, there's pain within me and therefore this is bad. You have to have a greater sense of consciousness. It says, okay, there's pain, I understand that. Can I look deeper, from like a deeper place of mindfulness? What's actually happening? Do I really know what this pain is about? Oh, the doctor says it's this. My mother says it's this, But if I ask my heart and feel into myself intuitively, what is this really about? Like one of the things you said is you knew what it was. You see, when you know what it is, you say, oh, this is God. God's giving birth in me. God's waking up in me. And it's easier to have a faith and trust when you walk through something, say, incredibly difficult. I can say, like, again, my experience was not a walk in the park. I mean, hell, it made me completely broke. I had to sell off all my belongings. I could barely function in the world. It was very inconvenient and uncomfortable. But because I was in touch with my divinity and with the experience of God giving birth in me as me, there's a sense of, and this is good. And this is good. So I kept walking forward in that, even though when I looked at my bank account, my ego was screaming, oh shit, what the fuck? Hey God, why won't you, can't you give me some money, or this isn't fair, or what the, And so that ego had to burn itself out. That sense of fear had to burn itself out. Sometimes you have to walk through hell to figure out how strong you truly are. And that's hard for a lot of people. I'm not going to lie, it's supposed to be hard. But if you see what falls away, oh, fear falls away. What did it get replaced with? A total confidence. A total connection with my indestructible, timeless nature. That's pretty good. People ask, would you go through that experience again? Sure. Hell yeah, I would. Would you wish it on your worst enemy? Hell no. Hell no. But if I had to do it again, I would. It wouldn't be easy. But it's like, I'll do whatever it takes. And, ever since I was a child, I had this inner prayer within my consciousness of, I want to know freedom in the world. I want to know God in me as me. And so when we have a prayer like that, or when we have a consciousness like that, God says, okay. But it's not, again, I'm not going to lie, it's not easy. It's not, oh, I just ate some ayahuasca and I realized I'm God and everything's perfect. It's not that. It's not that. This is something that's huge. And it takes a depth of commitment, a depth of surrender, a depth of letting go, a depth of trust, to really open into this.
It's funny how you talked about birth and the birthing process, because one of my experiences with the Kundalini was actually that. I had a 3-hour birthing session, many different strange sensations, but it was as if I was being reborn. Exactly. And I always find similarities between the birthing process and this. It is a biological process, almost physically it manifests as that, but it's divine, because it's involved with creation. So thanks for that analogy, because it really puts things into perspective.
The same path. It's God birthing herself into the form of you and I. And it's not like, I'm something special. This is happening with everyone. Just for some people it happens in a dramatic way.
Exactly.
Some people have this powerful experience in this dramatic way. Some people just have little experience of it, but just life in general is everyone on the planet. Like this is a spiritual realm, and everyone is on the path, and everyone has this constant invitation. Whether they've had a powerful Kundalini awakening or not, it's the same path. Just it's when Kundalini comes, it's it's just like, oh, what is this? This is an intensity for some reason is coming, is being born into this one right here and right now.
It's so funny because that was one of my questions. Why I find similarities between just a human existence, just going back into embodiment, growth, just the evolution of the personality and the divine self anyway. It's the same as the Kundalini process. It's just this one is more intense, and there's energetics involved, and I kind of was curious about that. Why are some people, is it just the path that they chose, or why are some people having Kundalini awakenings? And
the true answer is just, all of us are God. All of us have this, this channel here within us of these 7 chakra centers. And some of us are connected in a way where at some point we wanted to open. We wanted this new grace to come. We knew there was another way to live. And so whether we opened these doors, in our last lifetime, 20 lifetimes ago, whether we made a commitment to God, like, hey, when I come down to earth, yes, I want to be one of the individuals who opens in this way. But see, most of us just aren't conscious of that conversation. Like me, I was really conscious of it. Like I knew as a child, I wanted to live a divine life. I knew just this human limited perspective was not the totality of what I was. But even, people who are radically unconscious, they too are angels. But for some reason, they chose to come to this earth and cover themselves in darkness. And then maybe one day, all of a sudden, that darkness, gets blown apart by Kundalini. It awakens in them again, and they're like, "What the hell is this? I don't know what this is," because they're so identified with their human ego. It's like part of coming to this world is we forget who and what we are. We have to forget, so that we can play this game of evolution, so that we can grow, so that we can embody, so that we can have a human experience. And so I've met, so many individuals, and when I meet with an individual who's, completely unconscious, saying, I hate this, I hate God, I'm not spiritual, I don't want anything to do with this, what I see is their absolute divinity. I don't listen to their humanity, whining and moaning. I see their divinity. I see that they wanted this, that they chose to be a being of light here on planet Earth, even if it was difficult, confusing, and complicated. And so, why does it happen? I don't know. It's an evolutionary world. We are these angels. We incarnate to Earth. And this is what we're doing, all of us.
It's more of a remembrance of who we are. As
it's a remembrance of who we are and a growing into. It's an embodying it here on Earth. It's like easy to be an angel in heaven, but how about try to be an angel on a planet where there's war and rape and violence and hell and, animals eating each other and this and that, and it's crazy. And so can we bring love and light and truth to this planet? To me, I'm a warrior. I'll be like, yeah, hell yeah. Is it going to be hard? Okay. Is it going to hurt? Okay, that sucks, but, this is what my life's about. This is what everyone's life's about. They just, most people just don't know that. If you look at anyone's life and you just talk to them, deeply, you'll see they're going through something deep, they're going through something intense, and everyone's growing. Whether they're struggling with addiction or they're, trying to be a parent or a single parent or just trying to show up and do a good job at work, whatever it is, everyone is doing their best in trying to open into something greater in this world. Because most people don't know it in a conscious way.
That's kind of the conclusion I reached myself, because I see more divinity in people who are completely unconscious sometimes than those who are speaking nonstop about spirituality. So I see it's a
Exactly.
process going on with everybody. And within your process, you said that your day-to-day experience now is one of the present moment, where you're just continuously in this space, kind of memory falls away. Was it a gradual opening up into that? Do you still have bad days? What's your day-to-day experience like now?
Yeah. Yeah, so, if you look at Jesus, it's like, did Jesus have some bad days? It's like, hell yeah, they nailed his ass to a cross. It's like, so people have this thought, oh, I awaken into innate perfection and I stay there forever. That is a myth.
Yeah.
It's a complete and utter spiritual myth. This is an evolutionary world. Every single person on the planet, I don't care who you are, you're the lowest life form, the most greatest, incredible guru on the planet, every individual is growing. Every individual has bad days. I mean, hell, I'll tell you, this morning I woke up, I saw the news, and I'm crying. Is today a bad day? It's like, hell yeah, it's a bad day. It's like, is rape and violence and, people shooting each other and torture, and am I connected to what's happening here on planet Earth? Absolutely. Do I cry? Absolutely. Do I feel the pain and suffering of others? Absolutely. We have to remember, oneness means oneness. All kinds of spiritual people think oneness means, oh, I'm just one with bliss. No, we are one with everything. The greatest hells and heartache and sadness and trauma in the world, along with the greatest beauty and divinity and everything else. But at some point you open into a place where you in a sense become like the night sky. The night sky is eternally okay. You can do nothing to harm the night sky. But do you think it sheds a tear when it sees, 50 people get shot dead for no reason? Hell yeah, it does. Yeah, it does. We have to have a heart if we're truly going to be awake in this world. If we have a heart, we feel the pain of others. I mean, I'll tell you this, I feel more now than I ever did. And so people have this thought, again, we have too many pictures of a stone Buddha. Like, I love Buddha, but there's this idea that you turn into a stone statue. You don't feel, nothing moves you, everything's perfect, you stay in your own private heaven world. It's like, how arrogant is that? To go hide in your own private heaven world. To me, that's a ridiculous thought. It's a very immature spirituality to think we get to a place where we no longer feel. I feel so much. But does it move me? Is there a thought like, I can't handle this? No. If you look at life, I mean, hell, you look out of the night sky, there's galaxies, universes, eating each other. Star systems being sucked into black holes. I watched it's a brutal thought, and oftentimes people get confused by this type of consciousness. I was watching the tsunami that happened in Japan once, and I watched the waves come over and just, in a sense, just drown the village. And there was a sense of, this is absolutely and completely okay and totally perfect. And simultaneously, my human heart, was crying. Was crying. And so the true non-dual state is you feel everything, you experience everything, yet it's happening in a container of total openness, total okayness. But if you're a human being, yeah, you're going to stub your toe, it's going to hurt. If you have a body, and you get cancer, you should cry. You should grieve. Like my father died a couple years ago. Did I cry? Yeah. Was it completely and totally okay that he died? Absolutely. And that's a crazy thing to try to convey to people, that there's this vast eternal okayness. That's the realization of the Buddha. And yet, we live in an evolutionary world. I'm evolving as a human, as a father, as a husband, as a child of God, as a spiritual teacher. Like, I'm evolving. And so, yeah, I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to fall on my face. But it's interesting because it's happening within the world of bliss, a world of spaciousness, a world of intelligence. But again, I don't have the thought in my head that argues with God's intelligence. Big reason people suffer is we think we know better than God as human egos. And so when we think life should be a certain way, well, then we start the suffering process. But when we open into the intelligence of God and see this is how life is in an evolutionary planet, there's no argument. There's just a sense of, oh, yeah, people die. Tsunamis happen. Hurricanes happen. Earthquakes happen. I mean, hell, this last month, we had a mass shooting, like 4 hurricanes.
Yeah, 4 hurricanes.
Big earthquake, Mexico City,
life.
And, I mean, my biggest, heartache was I went to I got one of my cars fixed, and, the guy was like, oh, it's $700. Like, oh, I thought it was going to be $3, So, no big deal, but it's just like, okay, like this is part of life here on Earth. But is there a sense, like if anyone feels into the depth of their consciousness, there's a sense of eternal okayness, with whatever it is that happens. And, if you have a human heart, which I assume most of us do, oh, this kind of hurts. And so from this bigness, can we embrace the smallness? See, that's the path of evolution. It's like from this bigness, can we meet our humanity with love? If we feel like crying, can we cry? Like when my father died, I fell on the floor, cried my eyes out. I think I cried for I don't know, 6 months. But it happened within this space of, and it's totally okay. Totally okay.
Wow.
So this is the paradox, of a true non-dual awakening, a true non-dual relationship with life. All is God. All is okay. And we're humans in an evolutionary planet where things sometimes hurt. Sometimes they hurt really bad. Like I said, this morning I was crying for people I didn't know. I'm not going to bullshit and act like, oh, I live in a private bliss world. I live in the world of bliss, the world of spaciousness, the world of okayness. But I also live here on Earth. Whereas a human ego normally understands one experience. I'm angry or I'm sad. I'm in bliss or I'm not. I'm on a wonderful meditation retreat or I'm struggling and fighting with my kids. But one of the things that Kundalini does is it blasts us into that space, again, like the night sky, vast, spacious freedom that's eternally present, and you can't harm it ever. And simultaneously, worlds are being born into it. And in those worlds, is there suffering? Hell yeah, there's suffering. This idea that we could live without suffering, that's an old kind of, even like the Christians do that, where there's this sense of, I just want to get to heaven. I want to get out of this world. But Jesus didn't talk about running away to heaven. He talked about being love here, maybe even with your enemies, with people who are throwing rocks at you. It's a different kind of love. It's not a selfish love. And if you look at love, it's the opposite of selfish. It includes, it sits with, it's courageous. The beautiful thing that Kundalini does is because it's so intense, what it does is it forces you to face your fears, It forces you to let go into God. It forces you to connect with something greater than what you know yourself to be. It forces you to let go of that individual sense. It's me against life. I'm a victim of life, or a victim of God. Or got so many people I talk with, they feel as if they're a victim of Kundalini. Like they're plagued by this outside force. If you look at every great teaching, is all is God, all is one. Is it all loving God? Is this thing outside of me? Or is it my very nature? Am I being victimized by life? Or am I life?
When it comes to emotions, I feel like you just touched on one of the biggest myths, which is that it's not that we get out of suffering. It's not a get out of jail free card where we just eliminate the world. It's more, I feel like, that you just have more courageous presence to step into the world. Whereas
Absolutely.
before there was none. I almost feel like I'm getting pinched with more thorns, but I'm more brave when it comes to that. So I think Kundalini, a lot of people I've talked to, they're having more emotions, whereas before they were shut off to that kind of emotional body. With your experience, what tools to open up to the emotions, especially anxiety? Like it manifested with me with social anxiety, with just generalized fear. It was a big one that came up, and it's coming up for a lot of people. How would you show up courageously to that?
Well, we have to really, really be clear here about what is it that I'm experiencing. Like, what is it that's going on within me? So if it's just pure Kundalini energy, and we don't know what it is, people oftentimes call that anxiety. Now, I'm trained in Western psychology. So you ask a psychologist, what's anxiety? They don't know what anxiety is. They just call it something. They put it in, the diagnostical and statistical manual of mental disorders, whatever it is, the DSM-4 or DSM-5 now. Doctors don't know what things are. Psychiatrists don't know what things are. Psychologists don't know what things are. What is anxiety? Okay, if you feel into it directly, it's energy. That's all it is. So as the Kundalini awakens, like for me, it felt like there was like a fire hydrant of energy going up my spine. I mean, how it feels like that in this moment if I tune into it. But I'm just so accustomed to it. It just seems like my nature. But as you feel into it, okay, it's an intensity of energy. Is that bad? Is it good? Is it really overwhelming? But most people, with our ego, it's a very crude instrument. It feels something it doesn't understand. It goes online, what is this? Oh, it's anxiety. Ugh. I have generalized anxiety disorder. I need to take meds. But if we stop, like in a meditative way, we stop and look, what's happening here? Is this just a lot of energy? Okay. As the energy comes into my consciousness, into the space of my brain and my human consciousness, it makes a lot of thoughts. Okay. But what if I just let this energy flow through me? What happens then? Is it just a lot of energy that's moving through me? Is it going to kill me? If we look at, say, the human ego in an unconscious way, if we have a feeling in our body it doesn't understand, what does it do? It clamps down right away. It resists. It fights with it. When you fight with energy, you get all these weird blockages. You get these weird feelings. And that energy, it's not stopping. Like, what does this energy want to do? It just wants to move. Well, what if I let it move? Well, the way most people work with Kundalini, it's like they go out and they stand in a raging river, and they put their hands up and try to make it stop. They clench their body like, stop, stop. It's like, who's going to win? You or God? And so I want to be clear here. That's just, say, the movement of, say, Kundalini energy. But Kundalini energy, it knocks on the door of each of your chakra centers. And the chakra centers are, well, they're worlds of divinity, but they're also storehouses of our different human emotions and human experiences. So if in any of your chakra centers there's human emotion, we can ask, well, how do we deal with emotion? So if Kundalini comes into that chakra center and floods that emotion, oftentimes it'll feel anxious. It'll feel overwhelming. And so you ask, well, how do you deal with overwhelming emotions? How do you deal with an overwhelming child? You pick her up, you hold her, and you love her. And that's hard for a lot of people. But anxiety, if we just take Kundalini aside and say, what is anxiety? It's like a child knocking on the door of your heart. Listen to me, is what she's saying. Listen to me. You fucking ignored me for the past 20 years. Listen to me. Listen to me. Listen to me. I want to know that I'm good, that I'm worthy, that I'm lovable, that I'm not bad, that it wasn't my fault. But see, most people, they don't listen to what's within them. They look at it and they say, oh shit, I don't like that feeling. I'm going to clamp down. I'm going to close my throat chakra, and I'm going to repress that energy in my body. I'm going to smoke lots of weed, or I'm going to drink, or I'm going to take psychiatric medication and try to get this kid to shut up. It's like if you look at alcoholism is basically, you have an inner child within you who's screaming, wanting your attention, and you're just pouring vodka on that kid, like, shut up, shut up, kid, shut up. It's not healing. So to heal on the path, we must learn to love and learn to be courageous. And so what does that mean, just in the most basic sense? You feel what's within you. You acknowledge it. But here's the trick. You don't believe the story. You acknowledge the story. You don't dismiss it. That's what a lot of spiritual people say. Oh, that's just a story. You go to a child and the child's like, hey, when I was 6 years old, I was molested by my older brother. That's just a story. Get over it. That's not healing. What's healing is to hold that child and say, sweetie, it's not your fault. I love you so much. It's going to be okay. I'm going to hold your hand through this process as long as it takes. And so again, how do we do this energetically? You feel in your heart. It's normally your throat, your heart, your solar plexus, your belly. You feel into those areas. You breathe deeply into those areas. You hold them. You open into them. And you just gently hold this mantra like, I love you and it's okay. I love you and it's okay. I would lay on the floor and have panic attacks for like 4 hours, screaming, crying, and mucus pouring out of my nose, sweating through my clothes. And I would just hold myself. Hey, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. I'd connect with like the quietness of the room. And a lot of times I just look at the ceiling and just feel the peace of the ceiling, of the peace of the room, feeling myself completely supported on the floor or in my bed or wherever it was. And I'd let this sense of panic come through me. I'd let the little kid within me scream and shout and freak out. And I would just hold and be like, hey, it's going to be okay. So outwardly it would just look like, wow, this guy's crazy, or oh, that's a panic attack, or people would even be like, oh my God, are you okay? Like, he's crying. Like, I even do this in yoga. Like, I'll go to yoga and tears will move through me, and sometimes they're mine, sometimes they're a student of mine, sometimes it's someone I've worked with, whatever, but it's like there's sadness moving through my body, and I give myself permission to cry. But so many people here, we have this idea, I can't cry. I'm not allowed to cry. I can't feel. I don't know what it is that people think. They have the thought, I'll go crazy, or it's too much, or I'm a man, I'm not supposed to cry. I have to be a tough girl, I can't cry. But crying is healing. It's old pain that's emptying out of your consciousness. When people have those silly spiritual ideas like, okay, I'm having Kundalini awakening, I shouldn't feel any emotions. I shouldn't be a human anymore, or something stupid, like I need to repress it all and be a good little Buddhist, and that's not what the Buddha did. The Buddha felt everything within him, and he met it with love. That's how we heal. And so if you want to cry, you cry. And if you want to have a panic attack, you have a panic attack. But you have a panic attack in reality. Most people have a panic attack not in reality. They're like, oh my God, I'm going to die, I'm going to have a heart attack. It's like, no. What's actually happening? Your heart is racing, you're sweating, you're having some crazy thoughts. Okay, I can deal with that. I can deal with that. I can have crazy thoughts and not believe them. One of the definitions of samsara is just believing your thoughts. The definition of Maya is you believe your thoughts. You believe the illusion in your head. But if you have anxiety, you have a little girl in your heart who wants to be loved. Can you love her? Yeah, I can love her. Can you love her? Can you love yourself? Again, because everything's this movement of evolution, you look, what's going on with that little girl? Oh, she had a dad who didn't show up, or a mom who didn't show up, or maybe the kids made fun of her in middle school, or whatever it was. Maybe her body was, abused. What does that kid need? She needs you to hold her and to love her. And so what Kundalini does is it brings all these things into your consciousness. It says, hey, there's something big here that needs your love. It needs your love. And so again, the most simple thing we're doing, we're breathing into that which is painful. And the beautiful thing, as you breathe into that which is painful, that which you've ignored, that which you've denied, that which has been repressed, what do you learn? You learn you're worthy of love. You learn about unconditional love. You learn how strong you are. You learn that who and what you are is indestructible, that you've outlived every emotional, painful, ruthless experience you've ever had. These are huge things. Huge things. But the way most people teach Kundalini is, you go on this roller coaster ride into cosmic consciousness and you rest in bliss. Yeah, that's great. It's great to go to a heaven world of bliss. And then they schedule a Skype session with me and they say, Craig, it didn't solidify within me. I wasn't able to stabilize in the world of bliss. And I always say, yeah, well, what's going on in your chakra centers? Do you love yourself? Do you love yourself? Do you have a strong backbone? Do you have a clarity of mind? And they're like, oh, what? And I say, okay, well, let's work with what's going on in your heart. How about that? If you want to stabilize bliss within your consciousness, how about we learn to love ourselves first? How about we learn to love that little girl who's been screaming for your attention? Do you think it's helpful for human development to ignore your humanity and just try to hide out in some absolute space of divinity? Is that an act of unconditional love? Hell no. Hell no. The reason you get kicked out of cosmic consciousness is because there's some more meaningful work to do down here in your humanity. And so it's that willingness to embrace all those broken, sad, angry, disgruntled, frustrated, anxious aspects of yourself. If you want to be the love of the universe, can you love yourself first and foremost? A lot of people say, well, I don't feel worthy of love. Well, sit with yourself for 3 years, opening to your pain. And then ask yourself, am I worthy? Hell yeah, I'm worthy. I'm worthy of my own love.
It's amazing to me to think that the Kundalini and its intelligence it's teaching us the same way of opening up, because I honestly I didn't know what an emotion was. And it taught me to do just that. The child, the opening up to it. And it's just hearing you say that amazes me, because we're all reaching that same conclusion to be as loving, and to focus on self-love, and to be more about the embodiment. I think that was always it from the beginning, you know. Everyone always talked about going out into the ethers and spirituality, and for me it was always like, no, but what about the body? There's so much pain here. And talking about that pain in the body, I know that you've recommended things like body work and yoga, and that I found all of those to be extremely helpful, especially body work. I kind of fell into it in June, and I found a woman, you know, pressed on the same points that the Kundalini would activate, and I'd have to press them myself and cry or spasm. And so I found her, and she was doing the same points as the Kundalini, so I thought, what a match. And I just thought, I've done it 3 times now, plus 2 years of just kind of doing it by myself. And I wonder how much pain is stored in the body. I understand that we'll always feel pain and suffering throughout life itself. But when did you feel, or is the well never finished, like the releasing what's stored in the body itself?
Sure. Yeah, I think we should just get rid of all ideas of there being any end.
Okay. Yeah,
in
right?
an evolutionary world. Because it's like we are one with everything. Okay, so you work with your individuality. If you think you're done with that, then you can work with the pain of all your ancestors, right? When you're done work with that, you can work with the pain of all humanity. You know, like I told you this morning, I woke up, was crying for people that I didn't know. And so am I willing to take on their pain? Absolutely.
Yes. Because I thought, how could it be this amount of pain from my individual experience? And I thought it has to be coming from somewhere else. Like, how much can I store in this body?
Yeah. Well, I can tell you this, just in our DNA, in our biology, in this human form, like what a human body is. The human body is a movement of habit. You know, one of the things about evolution is it builds upon itself with layer upon layer and layer of habit. You know, like within me, I can find intense levels of just animal consciousness. You know, we're just like animals eating each other, fighting with each other, struggling to survive, the fight or flight response. And all of us have this within us. And I can feel, you know, war, violence, rape, you know, just tremendous anger, rage, jealousy, heartache, anything I can find within my consciousness if I'm honest. You know, and so there's this sense of, you know, as you're opening into God, and God is everything, you can open into the highest, but in order to open into the highest, you have to be willing to open into the lowest. That's how that works. You know, we don't just get to take this streamline up to heaven and live there forever. If you truly want to be open, if you truly know what oneness is, again, it's oneness with everything. Like I can find within my consciousness, which is the one consciousness of humanity, I can find vile individuals, thieves, liars, terrorists, you know, individuals who, you know, behead children, you know,
just the worst
soldiers,
of humanity.
warriors, the worst and the best.
All of
it's
it.
Just everything. You know, oneness is oneness. I can feel all those things within me. Just like the universe feels all of us. The question is how do we respond to it? Because we're in alignment with the movement of love, with the movement of intelligence, with the movement of wisdom, we meet it all with love. Whether we see it in ourselves or in another, our job is to meet it with love. That's how the world grows. That's how it changes. And so is there an end to it? No, it's like hell. I go to body, I mean, I used to go to body work all the time. I mean, I work at and owned and started like a healing clinic.
Oh,
You know.
wow.
So, but there's 13 different massage therapists there. Like any of them, and different healers, but I could get on any of their tables and they could find something unconscious within this body of mine. They could work with a knot and I'd be like, oh, look at that old memory, or I see some kind of violent thing, or I mean, I tell people all the time, I have the body of an Irish alcoholic. Like, and I don't drink at all. I'm actually allergic to alcohol. I can't even drink, I would like, maybe just occasionally, like, once a year or maybe once every 3 months, maybe to have a beer with some friends, but I can't because I'm completely allergic to it. But is that craving within my consciousness? Yeah. Where does it come from? Hell, everyone in my family who's died, they were an Irish alcoholic. And so I was given that gift, like that's in my DNA. And so how do I meet it? That craving, I meet it with love. And if you look at any craving, like a craving for alcohol, it's a beautiful thing. If you sit with it deeply, what is it? It's a desire for peace. It's a desire for peace. And so that aspect of my consciousness, or that aspect of my ancestors, I invite it into the peace that's here. I say, welcome. I don't say, get out, you're bad, you're stupid, I shouldn't have this. I'm too spiritual to have alcoholism in my consciousness. No. I say, welcome. Let yourself be touched by this peace. Let yourself be flooded with this peace. And so you bring it into the peace. And it begins to calm down. I'm 40-something years old, and this has been going on for years. I don't have the thought, when is this going to be over? This idea about, the alcoholism in my body. There's just a sense of it's here, and I'm working with deeper and deeper levels of it, and I'll sit with it as long as it takes. As long as it takes. Like sometimes it's a little silly for me because, like desire to drink. I see a cold beer, I'm like, oh wow, it's so good, But like I said, I can't drink. I get a migraine headache within 10 seconds of having a sip.
That really clarifies things for me. I think it was just because I thought if it was stored in my body, it was mine, and to understand that it doesn't matter.
Yeah, but Sweetie, like, what's
layers.
your body? What's your body? Where'd it come from? Is your body one with all of life? Is it made of, earth and wind and fire and sky or water or whatever it is, the elements? Are the elements connected with all of life? Is your DNA yours? Is your ancestry yours? It's like, what is this human body? It's an evolution machine.
Wow.
And it's we have, and so it's like people take their lives way too personally. And one of the things that happens, the more we awaken, it's hard to take things so personally. So if you have anger within yourself, it's like, where did this anger come from? Okay, it came from God. God created anger. Okay, how does God work with anger? With love. If you really look at anger, a lot of spiritual people, myself included, I used to be terrified of anger. Because I'd have these visions of like punching holes in walls. And my funniest vision was, I'd sat in meditation for, 20-something years, but I'd have this vision of me taking my chair over my head and just smashing it into the earth. And just with this movement of rage. But as I really connected with anger and said, like, what the hell is this? Is this just about my father and how he treated me or something? Is this just about the injustice in the world? Is this just about my ego? Because it's easy to say, oh yeah, it's just about those things. But as I opened into anger, like really felt, what is anger? I began to feel this volcano exploding within me. Again, that's what Kundalini feels like for a lot of people, like a volcano exploding within me. What is anger? oh, it's tremendous power. Oh, if I let anger unravel, it becomes power.
Wow.
Can you become comfortable with being huge? With being this huge presence? And a lot of spiritual people, myself included, I had an idea, to connect with God, to be God, you're always bowing, you're always humble, you're always going last in line, you're making yourself small. But God's not small. God is huge. Who and what we are is huge. So I had to spend a lot of time getting comfortable with how huge I am, with how big I am, how powerful I am. And I don't mean some silly way like I'm powerfully enlightened or some, spiritual bullshit like that, but just a sense of allowing my consciousness to be huge, to be as big as the room, to be as big as the building, to be as big as the sky. Can I be comfortable with being huge? I had a different kind of anxiety about that because as a kid, I had this idea if you were big, that was synonymous with being abusive and being an authoritarian, because that's, kind of the house I grew up in, so I just had that thought, an innocent thought as a child. But as you grow up, so I was terrified of being big, I was terrified of anger, because I thought I'd end up, this other way, if I let my ego do what it wanted. But if you really work with the ego, if you meet it with love, because everything's a manifestation of God, you meet it with love, and watch. What does anger grow into? Power. Sometimes it's just swift, decisive action, like, okay, I know what to do and how to do it, but sometimes it's just like a willingness to be really big. Sometimes when people come in the room with me, at one of my classes, they get a little freaked out. They're like, I don't like this guy, because there's a sense that he's too big. They're afraid of that, and they come from a spirituality where it's, oh, we all have to be small. Now, if the guy's big and he's an arrogant prick, it's like, yeah, leave the class. But if he's big and it's just a lot of power, a lot of energy, look at that, say, am I afraid of that? Why would I be afraid of that? Can I be this big? Am I also this big? One of the funny things, I had this experience with my father after he died. I went and saw a friend of mine, a colleague. His name's Bentinho. He's another spiritual teacher. But I talked with him shortly after my dad died, and he said, have you talked to your dad, Craig? And I said, oh, yeah, I've talked to him, yeah. He's like, no, but have you really, talked with your dad? And in that moment, there was like this huge angel that came into the room. And I was like, oh, hi, Dad. And I saw he's this huge beacon of light. He wasn't the guy who I grew up with in childhood who I was terrified of. It was this incredibly bright light. And it really showed me something. I was like, it is funny because it kept me up all night because the intensity of light of my father was so brilliant. I was like, oh my God, this is my dad. And see, none of us really know who we are. We've identified with these egos and we think of ourselves as this small thing, or we get beat up by someone else's ego and we think, oh, that's who they are. But when I got to see my dad, when I was able to see him, because my friend Bentinho, he invited my father in the room. When I saw my father, I was like, oh, wow. And then there was this level of forgiveness, this level of just letting go, and this level of just absolute respect for the angel that my father is. And it's a funny thing because, on earth, I can probably joke with my dad now, but on earth, my father was not an angel, But he was an angel, but he didn't know it, and he didn't, that wasn't what was predominant. And so like none of us really know who and what we are and how big we are. But it takes someone who's courageous enough to, again, open all these doors and see, like, what is it that I am? Like, is it true I'm one with God? What does that mean? How is that experienced? Like a lot of people, they read in a book, I'm one with God, and they just have a sense, oh yeah, I'm one with God, and they do like some kind of philosophical thing, which is boring and dry. To me, I want to know that in my bones, in my consciousness, in my essence, in my very presence. I want to know that's who I am. And the funny thing is as you start realizing this, just like you were saying, you start to see beauty everywhere. You start to see this divinity in everyone you look at. You don't become this arrogant person who's just like, I'm God and nobody else is. There's a sense of everyone and everything is holy. And it's beautiful, it's wonderful, it's incredible to see that. And then you begin to see, oh, this is heaven. I thought this was hell here on planet Earth. But this is heaven, we just didn't know it. We just didn't know it.
Wow. I realized just now that you had, I don't know how, answered every single one of the questions that I had for you.
Yeah.
And it's in a beautiful way without even me asking you. I'm not even surprised.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining with me. And I was going to ask you as well, if you had any bit of advice for anybody undergoing an awakening process, would it be love? Would it just be to open up to love? If you could leave them with anything.
Yeah, of course, to open to love. But I mean, I will say this, because like I said, I've met with thousands of people, and what I've found with the people I've met with is that that too many people, get flooded with Kundalini energy. They stay up late at night. They read these spiritual blogs from people who didn't make it all the way through the process.
It's terrible.
And they go into states of panic. They go into states of hell. It's like going and getting bad financial advice from a used car salesman.
I say don't Google. Don't Google it.
Yeah, don't Google. It's good to find a good teacher, and it's a rare thing, unfortunate. That's unfortunate in this world. There's a lot of well-intentioned healers who a lot of times make matters a lot worse. I'd say stay away from Kundalini yoga and breath work, just as a general rule. I'd say absolutely practice yin yoga or hatha yoga, a light, gentle form of yoga that's not pushing. Listen to your heart, trust in yourself, know that this is good, and see if God can connect you with someone who's actually good. There's very few people who've been through this process and who've actually come out of it in a sane, healthy, happy, state of consciousness. Even people will go see great gurus and they get all messed up or get terrible advice. Or I met someone the other day, they were kicked out of, I've met a lot of people who've been kicked out of the TM kind of group or church or whatever you want to call that. A lot of people get terrible advice from Indian gurus who don't understand Western psychology or the movement of evolution. Too many people try to meditate their way through this. But it's a fully inclusive path. It's not a path where you just meditate and everything works out. You need to learn to love yourself. You need to work with the inner child. You need to heal your body. You need to be a loose and flexible consciousness. You have to have a healthy, mature thoughts about yourself, about the spiritual path. So to me, it's like we must find a qualified teacher. And by qualified, I don't mean that you took a 200-hour Kundalini yoga class. That's not what I mean. I mean someone who actually knows what they're talking about. And if I scan my consciousness and try to think of any individuals, Bonnie Greenwell's good. Beyond her, I'm going to really struggle.
And you? People have you.
To find anyone. Yeah, like I'm available. If anyone wants to meet with me, they're welcome to send me an email. We'll set up a time. But and I know there's a lot of people who try to be helpful. A lot of Buddhist traditions tell you just to ignore it, and that's just it doesn't really work to ignore Kundalini. It doesn't work to be infatuated by it either. But, we really have to open to it and see, how is this God? What is God trying to show me? I'd invite people to call on God and invite this intelligence to wake up in them to lead the way forward. So anyways, I could go on and on about.
No, thank you so. Me
this
too.
and that.
Honestly, I just I feel your energy, and it's wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thank you
of
for
course.
meeting with me.
Yeah, no, it's my pleasure. If you want to do it again, you just let me know, and
Yeah.
I can feel. It's like anytime I meet with someone, I can feel, especially in you, just a real bright light. So it's my pleasure. I feel blessed too by the encounter. So thank you.
Thanks.
For having me today. It's good to meet in this way.
Yeah.
And much love to you. So you take good care.